Oh, okay. I know I mentioned that last time this would be something very different, and I think that's kind of what I have here for you today. Um, I'll kind of just cut to the chase here. This is from a manga series called the Five Star Stories in the mecha called Mortar Heads. As you can see here, it says IMS, which I think just stands for Volk's Injection Mortar Heads Series. Uh, why it's not IMHS, I don't know, but that wouldn't be the first time that I've seen weird acronyms with Japanese stuff. But this is Batch the Black Knight. If you're familiar with Heavy Metal L Game, you might recognize this looks very similar to the Bat Shoe, which in the manga, they like in all the translations and official or not that I've read, they refer to this as the Bat Shoe. Um, but there's some kind of complicated relationship between Five Star Stories and Heavy Metal L Game. Being that a lot of the mecha designs for L Game were, in fact, all of them were done by the artist who is behind Five Star Stories. So a lot of them kind of got repurposed and reiterated on, and this is one of them. But this is from the Five Star Stories Batch or Batch Shoe, the Black Knight. It is a mortar head, and to kind of give you an idea of what Five Star Stories is, it's almost science fantasy. It exists in a like far off galaxy where there's a lot of like the concept of giant robots less being war machines that are mass produced and more of like suits of armor that are custom made for the nobility, and hence the title the Black Knight. And this is a really interesting kit. This is made by Volks. It is a 1/144th scale kit. Now I have built a kit in the IMS line before from Five Star Stories many years ago when I was in high school. It was a 1/100th scale V Siren Neptune, and that kit was gorgeous. I really regret getting rid of it, but I might get it again because they're pretty accessible. I actually got this from a website retailer. They were having a sale. This was on sale for $20, which was kind of hard to ignore with something that is this high quality. Now, the actual part quality, plastic quality, and detailing is immaculate on Volks products. They've made a couple things. I've made several Volks kits other than just Five Star Story stuff. They did some Votoms kits, Votoms, uh, particularly the Berserga Blue Knight kits. So I have the Testarossa and the Shadow Flare that are in their larger scale kits. Those were amazing kits. Like I mentioned, I've built the V Siren in the V Siren Neptune in this same series, but in the larger scale. And then I have right here another kit. You'll have to excuse me. This is probably going to be. I apologize. I do have another kit by Volks. As you can see, it's very, very dusty, but this is the Virtual On or Cyber Troopers Virtual On Temjin. This is particularly from Oratorio Tangram, which was the one of my favorite Dreamcast games. This is also a really incredible kit. I've never finished it simply because it requires a lot of painting, as in everything you see that is orangey yellow on this kit, you have to paint. Uh, it's been a work in progress. I think I've completed some stuff. There's a torso. Whoa, excuse me. There's a torso, but I mentioned this specifically because the Temjin, much like the Temjin, a lot of these IMS kits do require painting. Maybe not as much. Usually these are pretty darn accurate to their color matching or color correction. There isn't any stickers. In fact, as we'll get into here, um, there is none. There are no marking stickers on this whatsoever. There's a lot of It does come molded in most of the colors, but one of the most interesting things is that rather than giving you stickers, they give you paint codes and some other things. So like the eyes need to be painted, which I think shouldn't be too difficult. I can do at least that. I don't know what else in here needs to be painted. Maybe some parts on the torso. But as you can see, this is a pretty interesting design. And this is done by an artist named Mamoru Nagano. His artwork is very iconic. That's how I would describe it. Once you see Nagano's artwork, it's kind of hard to unsee it. A really good example is right here. This is the Ryobot, or Ryobot, however you want to say that. This is the Ryobot. I'm going to try my best to kind of sit him here. Ryobot L game. And you can see this is very Nagano-esque. Very similar proportions. It's got the high heels, very slender torso, large weapon, very, very kind of narrow-bodied. But this is one of his many designs. I'm trying to remember how I had him up here on the shelf. Such is, I suppose, the nature of having so many things in a collection. Whoa. Foot just bumped my camera. Excuse me. But as you can see, it is molded in color. You get some really nice black kind of, I don't know, black. You get the red. This is all a flexible polycap material, including these cables, which is very nice. That can facilitate some articulation. I will note, from my experience building the Neptune, these kits don't really tend to be the most articulate, and that's not the point of them. These are almost, I don't know if they're derived from, because a lot of the original 5-Star Story stuff was mainly garage kits. So I don't know if these are like model kit adaptations of garage kits per se, but the point is that they're supposed to be very, very elegant static models, and that is how I would describe Nagano's design language for the mortar heads, as just hyper elegant. They're very, these are built for nobility and handcrafted for nobles, and they are just very, very elegant and ornate in their design. So you can see, not a huge number of parts, but definitely more than you'd expect for something of this size. Now, I don't know how tall a mortar head is in relation to, say, a 1/144th scale Gundam. One thing that is nice is that the shield is actually 2 pieces. I was worried that the shield was going to be just this single red piece, and I would have to paint it black, but it's not. It is 2 separate pieces, so we don't have to do anything super crazy. I think there's just some minor color correcting stuff that I can actually paint by hand without issue. So, the mortar heads are very, very, just have this very ornate design cue to them. And I'm not sure how big they are in comparison to a Gundam. 1/144th scale of this might be high grade size, it might be bigger. I have a feeling it's going to be bigger. The Neptune, if I recall, that was 1/100 scale, it felt about the same height and size roughly as a master grade kit, albeit very different proportionally. So I honestly don't have a really good reference point on how these units turn out, because this is only my second 5-Star Stories things I've built or will have built, and I'm really excited by that. I love this design. Granted, I still would have gone for the 1/100th scale, which you can actually purchase from Volks directly. They have their own US distribution network, so you can go to Volks USA and they have these kits in stock online. They're pretty readily accessible. I will warn you, the only reason I bought this kit in particular is because it was on sale. Normally these kits, at least the 1/144th scale kits, are usually pretty reasonably priced, maybe. You have to understand that these are not maybe meant for your average Gunpla person, especially current year Gunpla person. I'll just put it that way. I'm having a really hard time putting the lid back on this box. These are very much intended for more advanced modelers. There's a lot more work that's going to be required for these kits. They are much more like traditional model kits in that sense. Um, they're very high quality, but they do still require a lot of work, whether that be painting or modification or parts fitment. As you may have noticed in the manual that I pointed out, there was a section where it says you have to trim this certain area to a certain length. I think that's a one-to-one thing, so I don't know. Either way, I can measure that pretty easily. But this will be a very interesting project. I'm not mostly because I don't have a relative idea of what this is going to look like when it's done. The pictures you're seeing here are very, very elaborate, beautifully painted uh, versions of the kit. Especially, it's very apparent with these metallic red accents, which are very much not present on the color kit. I'm okay with that. I'm gonna. I'm maybe doing this kit a disservice by not, going all in and doing a full paint scheme on this and full paint job. But if I recall, the Neptune still came out really well, even with just minimal painting, with just like the areas I had to paint. I'm hoping this will be similar too. One thing that is interesting, I've recently, since purchasing this, have started to reread the manga and go back through it. And this actually is the first Mortarhead, one of the first two Mortarheads that appear in the comic, or in the manga. And it's similar, but it's also very different looking. Notably, the head, the shield, and the equipment are different. It still maintains this very samurai-esque appearance. Not all of the mortar heads look like that. I wish I still had my Neptune and I could compare it to you, but some of them are more Western, kind of medieval looking. And then I would describe them as like their own aesthetic in general. They're very, very unique and they are very beautiful. And so a lot of times when people say like, oh, gunpla is not difficult, you can get into robot modeling, pick a kit you like or a design you like, and particularly with gunpla, and you should be fine. I even said that about the Hyakushiki Kai. I'm gesturing to it because it's off camera. I have them displayed kind of in the corner of my desk on a little stand area. um but I don't think I can say that about kits made by Volks. These are very much, they need glue and they need at least some paint. Um, I'm going to try my best to get by here. I can, the gluing was not an issue. This is more or less going to be kind of a statue. They do, they're articulate, but they're not super articulate. I've said that already, but if I recall correctly, that is how this is going to be. Um, there should be, like I said, minimal painting. I think the sword blades may be a problem, though. I don't think those are molded in silver. I believe you will have to paint those. So, my goal here, I have a couple of ideas on how I want to approach that, whether that be through um, paint pens. I've used the AK Interactive, that gold paint pen on my Gyan build, and I thought it was lovely. So I'm hoping they have a silver, and particularly this shade. It's kind of hard to see just because of my lighting, but this shade of like not super chromy, like reflective silver, but a nice aluminum color, I think can be doable. But it also may be that if this is 1/144th scale, I think let's actually go ahead and try to look for the swords in here. I did see the hilts, but there's definitely no silver in here. At least I don't think there is. These pieces here are the hilts. He does have two swords. If you get the 1/100 scale kit, I think it comes with 3. Here's one of the blades. So it's not huge. I can maybe get away with painting that by hand. I do have plenty of aluminum kind of colored paint that I use for usually dry brushing, but I believe he has like a samurai setup where he has a wakizashi and a katana, so a short sword and a long sword. Maybe. I could be wrong. Maybe that's a lie and he only has the one sword. So I'm only seeing that one blade. I'm going through these again. Just looking. The shield. Sorry, I say shield. In Mortarhead terminology, this is called a veil. Usually, they also incorporate like extra like weaponry and functions, whether it be mobility or other things of that nature inside the shield. So they're called veils. They're kind of their own thing. I'm actually seeing two blades here. So you can see, yeah, there are two long swords. It's kind of hard to tell. There's two of them in this package, which, as you can kind of see, yeah, they're a black color. That, I mean, you might be able to get away with that depending on how you feel about that, but I would like to paint those. You can also see, I think these are either his heels or his horns. All the mortar heads have this very feminine kind of proportioning to them, which I think is very interesting. They have very narrow waists, wide hips, kind of, I mean, you can see it for yourself, and I think that's a really cool design scheme. I don't know. I think that they look very pretty. Um, that helps kind of sell that very elegant sort of suit of armor, or this thing is as much of like as much a sculpture as it is a weapon, which I think is a really fascinating idea in their universe. Um, if you haven't read the manga, I can recommend it. I think it's fascinating. It's really well written. Artwork is beautiful. It's pretty readily accessible if you Google it. I'll just leave it at that. And as far as I know, I don't know if there's any official US distribution. I'll have to look that up. But uh, it is accessible. I'll put it that way. But I'm really excited to have this. For $20, this is a steal. And depending on how this goes, I have my eyes on one of their other 1/100th scale kits. I might buy the Neptune again because I love that design. I may also get the LED Mirage V3, one of the variants of those in the 1/100th scale, because that's my preferred scale. And those kits actually have a complete full inner frame and skeleton and a cockpit for both the pilot and co-pilot, or as in the universe, the pilot, who is in this area in the chest, is called the headliner, and the co-pilot, which is like a techno-organic created individual called the Fatima, sits inside the head. And on the Botchu, it is this is like a little door. I don't think the actual head does that on the model kit, and on most of them it doesn't, other than the Mirage. For whatever reason, Volks put a lot of extra effort into the Mirage kits in particular. Not even the Knight of Gold, which is the protagonist mortar head from the series. But the Mirage kits in particular have are like the most detailed, oddly enough. But I don't know timeline wise how long this guy's going to take. I think it's going to take a little bit more effort than normal, but I am going to get started on him as soon as I finish filming this here. So, um, I think I'm going to do that. Settle down with a drink, a stronger drink, and see how this goes. I have some things I need to get off my mind. All right. Well, you guys have a happy holidays and a happy Hanukkah. Bye.